I think what you'll see here is there's going to be a lot more supply of hemp pulp becoming available in the next couple of years. One of the biggest problems right now is the price.
Thank you very much for joining us here on What Canna Radio, where we take pride in bringing a dose of reality to your conversations about hemp. We are very happy to say that today's episode is brought to you by CBD Peer. Please stick around to the end of the show to learn how you can get a 15% discount on their world-class American-made CBD products. My name is Aiden Washness. I'm happy to be your host today, and now enjoy the show. Hey Morris, thank you very much for joining us here on What Canna Radio. It's a pleasure to have you on as a leader in the hemp space, particularly in the United States, but also globally with NOCO as the largest hemp expo in the entire world at this point in time, and also working on projects like Tree Free Hemp with hemp paper in the United States. It's quite incredible to be able to talk with you today. I actually, for my 21st birthday, my mother, instead of taking me to a bar to get drunk, I got to go to NOCO in 2017 for 21st and experienced Colorado and full legal cannabis and everything, and it was a phenomenal time. Just incredible to see where NOCO has gone from 2017 to even now. I mean, it's just insane, really. I mean, even just the vendors that are currently in the expo, in terms of like whether or not you have CBD or more people getting to textiles and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, for those that don't know you, could you just tell a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got into the hemp space, your history, all that you want to share?
Thanks for having me on, Aiden. I'm glad that NOCO was a life-changing experience for you. It's always cool to hear those stories. So, and we have come a long way since 2017, and we've come even a much longer way since 2012 when we started Colorado Hemp Company, which originally started based around, I was coming out of the music industry. I've been in the music industry since really the late 80s. And I worked for a large music and video distributor for 7 years. And then I started my own music production company, kind of one-stop shop, doing CD and DVD manufacturing, packaging, printing, studio coordination, music distribution, physical and digital, and live events, concerts, festivals. And that's really where I kind of built my skill set that I took kind of past the music industry. And when we started this Colorado Hemp Company project in 2012, it started out as a merchandise company when we were doing t-shirts and hats. And we started working with a company there in the Northeast called Wicked Hemp Footwear, who was making hemp shoes at the time. And then I also hooked up with another couple companies, Hempies out of California, that's still in business. They make wallets and hats and beanies and a variety of other kind of apparel, textile type products. And then there's a company called Hemp Mania out of Washington that's been making bags and cordage and wallets and similar type stuff as Hempies. And they're still in business as well. And so that's how we really got into it, was creating our own t-shirts. Coming out of the music industry, it's like, hey, we could start a merchandise company. And that was really the easiest point of entry for us into the marketplace. And being kind of ahead of the curve here in Colorado with medical and recreational, and then hemp being allowed after the Amendment 64 in 2012 that legalized adult use. It's like, hey, let's really start looking at this hemp thing, because I think that this can be significant to our planet and to humanity and all the possibilities that could happen with it. So from there, we started Tree Free Hemp in 2013 as our second brand. Being in the printing industry and doing CDs and DVDs and posters and shirts and all that type of stuff, it was one of the things we stumbled upon. Hey, here's a hemp paper. Let's start doing business cards and posters, and we can do stuff for bands and events and festivals and that sort of thing. And then we started NOCO in 2014 as our, here we're going to get into the event side of things, because there wasn't really much going on at that point in time that was hemp specific. There was marijuana events going on in Colorado and in California and in Washington with Seattle Hemp Fest. And those were, more at the time, they were, real activist driven, and there wasn't much going on with hemp. So ours was hemp centered, hemp focused. And from 2014 through 2019, we just saw this explosion in the hemp market and in our events, and we launched additional events, and here we are in 2020, and we're not having really any in-person events, unfortunately. We were going to have NOCO, but unfortunately 3 weeks beforehand we had to pull the plug, and now we pushed it into next year.
Yeah, no, that was definitely unfortunate. I have a ticket ready to go when it's held, but It's yeah, absolutely. But I mean, you guys also have been doing lots of stuff on social media and posting interviews and just podcasts and that kind of stuff. So you have been keeping stuff going, which it's challenging to try to adapt to this new environment, especially if you're very used to completely in person events. But it's there's lots of opportunities that kind of come with it. But yeah, the NOCO event in terms of the whole when I first got into the hemp industry, it was pretty much right 2014, right after I graduated high school, and I thought initially I was going to go into the marijuana side of things, and then when I learned that legally speaking, marijuana was just THC, really when it comes down to it. I mean, more minutiae to it, but you just have the THC that's the separating factor. Then hemp was everything else. It was a lot more exciting to go into that and to really explore because you can speak with so many different people. But as you said, the whole idea of it was more activist driven kind of early on than versus the industry side of things coming in and like really playing an economic role in it. And so for I mean, when I first went to the NOCO in 2017, it was like I don't know, maybe like 50% CBD companies, and so for your perspective, you get to see all the different companies and kind of like percentages of everything that's going on. So, what are the markets that, or first off, how has the market developed from the time that you started NOCO to now? But then also, what are markets that you think are going to kind of develop going forward and maybe will grow larger than maybe the CBD market?
So when we started, really the first year was more kind of your traditional hemp people and industrial people that had apparel or jewelry. We had Envirotextiles with Barb and Summer, who were there at the very first one, and they were definitely like the big leaders in Colorado who knew the most about hemp. And then we have Agua Das, who's another hemp guy that's been doing hemp ice cream, and he has a weaving thing. And Agua Das is super smart, and he's still around. And but all of a sudden there was this, here comes CBD, which most of the hemp people really, I mean, that wasn't even on the radar when we were trying to get hemp legalized and really move hemp into the mainstream. The CBD just came out of the marijuana side, and all of a sudden here's these genetics that don't really have hardly any THC, but they're boosted with CBD, and CBD is great for all these different things. We're finding out more and more that that there's all these various benefits of CBD. So in the beginning, it was really the hemp side of things, and then it blew up with all the CBD companies and people having brands. So that was really a driving factor back in 2015, 2016, 2017. And it still is today, but it's shifted because it's not all about CBD brands. And our show has really turned into a supply chain show that has genetics companies that are doing everything from CBD to fiber and grain to equipment companies like Bish Enterprises and John Deere and big equipment manufacturers, and you got irrigation companies and drying companies and manufacturers of equipment that's going to help at some point during the supply chain. So we've got a lot of that, and that's been great for local US companies that are building this equipment. I mean, some stuff's coming in from out of the country, some of these equipment companies that have had processing stuff. But when you think of like a lot of the extraction equipment and stuff, a lot of that's being manufactured right here in the United States, and it's great for US manufacturing. And I think that we're going to continue to see that as, CBD and the cannabinoid side is going to be there. It'll be a strong industry. We're in a bit of a glut right now. We've still got this regulatory situation with the USDA and the FDA, and where's it going to go? And people are still hesitant about jumping into the market, and stuff sitting there because it can't hit all parts of the market because it just can't from a regulatory standpoint. But once that happens, then that's going to open up. There's still going to be great opportunities across the cannabinoid supply chain. But when the fiber and grain supply chain really start to develop here in the United States, you'll be able to see all kinds of different points throughout that supply chain where there's economic opportunities locally and domestically.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm 100% on board with that. I participated in the CBD company kind of early on a few years ago for maybe like 6-7 months, and then I decided that I really wanted to target the materials end of things, and getting more into the fiber side of hemp, right? And it's fascinating to see because I find so many people that see it and they're like totally disinterested in it because there's not enough revenue generation, right? With CBD, you can plant just a few plants and you can get hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, right? Although people don't really take into account all the steps in the supply chain, from the point that you actually take it from the field to the point that it's actually in a customer's hands, and even the regulation that goes into that, right? As you were saying, with the FDA, but not even just the FDA, getting quality control standards in place for processing, right? And getting making sure that everything's safe and all that kind of. There's just so many different steps that are in the chain that people don't recognize. But getting into fiber, it's very similar, right? In the aspect that so many people think that, oh, if I just grow some fiber, I have a decorticator, I can decorticate it, and then now I can just make a whole bunch of products, right? But there's a whole bunch of steps that you have to go in, and it very much depends on what those potential end products are going to be. And you made a really good point in that you started with t-shirts, right? Or you started with apparel, the product end of things, and then you worked your way back and you built out the supply chain to then meet that, right? Maybe started purchasing out of the country with suppliers that are able to manufacture products already, and then once you have an established marketplace and demand for the product, then you have to work your way backwards and actually build out the supply chain. Whereas I find a lot of people oftentimes look at, oh, can I just build the supply chain and not worry about, like, once I build it, then they will come, right? That whole mentality, and it's very challenging to kind of move in that direction. And Mark Privatera, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he's been doing a whole bunch of research here in New York and also in California. And the thing that he always harps on is, there may be 25,000 products that you can manufacture out of it, but what's actually going to be economically viable and where you're actually going to be able to build from that in order to sustain it long term, right? Because there's we need the social and environmental sustainability, but we also need the economic sustainability in order for the industry to really grow, or for hemp to become more of the feedstock and different industries to grow. It's fascinating to see now that the CBD, or maybe not the cannabinoid bubble, because now lots of, as you said, cannabinoids are going to grow. CBD maybe popped for a little bit, and it'll eventually just become another one of the cannabinoids and kind of go into that market. But it's interesting to see how textiles and everything was the initial kind of generator to get hemp going in the United States, and then the marijuana people kind of jumped in and were like, oh, well, we can make this legal cannabinoid and we can sell it really, really in big numbers and quantities, and it's okay, it's not THC, like we can buy through all these loopholes. But then now we're actually coming back to the fiber side of things, or even grain side of things, although Canada kind of has that on lock right now. That's going to be a challenge to compete with them on a mass scale for at least a few years. But fiber is just exciting because there are so many different components that you can make out of it, right? I mean, just simply taking the hurd and the bast fiber and be able to send it off into all these different directions, it's incredible. I mean, from textiles to paper, right, with Tree Free Hemp, or just all the different components, hempcrete, whatever it might be, plastics potentially, although that has some questionable aspects of it. But could you kind of explain a little more in terms of Tree Free Hemp, and like what are the benefits of using hemp fiber over like tree pulp? And then also, is Tree Free Hemp all United States based, or are you still sourcing from elsewhere?
So Tree Free Hemp, when we started that, we actually connected with Greenfield Paper Company out of San Diego, and Rick and Sherry Smith have been in the hemp paper market since they bought that, and I believe they bought it in like 2005 or 2006. But the guy that originally started in the 90s is super smart, boutique paper type guy, and wanted to create a variety of tree-free papers. And so I connected with those guys, and I'm still working with those guys. So those guys have been making this paper. They were making it with fiber coming from Canada up until about 2013 or 2014. And all the fiber situation stuff dried up in Canada. And so there had not been anything developed in the United States. Sunstrand had tried to create material, but there wasn't quite the fit yet. All the pulping was originally being done at a place called Cheney Pulp in Ohio. and they pulp a variety of different non-wood based materials, cotton and recycled materials and so forth. And so at this point, the pulp is coming from a place in Spain called Celesa. They're really the purveyors of fine natural fiber pulps on the planet. And there's several people working on different processes here in North America. And there are new pulps that are being developed, and they're on a smaller scale, but that's getting upscaled right now. And so I think what you'll see here is there's going to be a lot more supply of hemp pulp becoming available in the next couple of years. One of the biggest problems right now is the price, is where wood pulp, which has been, the timber industry has been subsidized for over 100 years, just like fossil fuels. And all this equipment and technology has been built out and funded by we, the people, that's now owned by industry that is, it's the timber industry, it's the fossil fuel industry. They don't want the hemp industry coming to take away their business. So how do we work into this system where it's been really just a monopoly of these materials? And I think that we know now that deforestation is a problem. Chopping down forests that have been growing for anywhere, up to 100 years for paper, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, the trees are an important part of our ecosystems. And when you clear cut them and then maybe you put in big ag or something like that, I mean, you've decimated ecosystems. It's just not good for our earth. So when we can grow materials in 90 to 120 days that can replace these materials that are way less impactful on our environment, we need to explore those opportunities, because the time is, it's moving on, and climate change is real. People can sit there and deny it, but humans are impacting climate change. That is just a fact. And the timber industry is one industry that's terrible. Agriculture is another, fossil fuels is another, and hemp really addresses all of those. And if we can grow hemp on a mass scale, it can be a feedstock for this, and we can all do away with wood pulp, and we can utilize hemp, other natural fiber materials, and then recycled materials. And mycelium and mushrooms. Here's something else that nature provides us that can then in turn provide us with all of our needs. And this goes to the bioplastics and composite side of things too. Between mushrooms, mycelium, hemp, cannabis, here's feedstocks that can really reverse a lot of the bad stuff that we've done the last 100 years.
Absolutely, yeah. It's actually quite incredible every single time I look at hemp, in terms of the environmental impact of it, in terms of the biomass that's grown versus the trees, and also even just the economic aspect of that too. I mean, somebody putting money down and having an ROI in 30 years is quite a different ROI than looking at it on a yearly basis, right? And it's fascinating to see, first off, where we've gotten, right, legislatively, and then also just as the industry has been growing. And I think as much as I find that fiber is going to be the most beneficial long-term feedstock for hemp, the cannabinoid industry did kind of point a little bit more of a spotlight on us, right, and kind of give some light to the situation, whereas before it was just the hippie thing to do. You just wore hemp clothes and that was it, and it was just the crazy people in the woods that were all about this. But now it's becoming more of a mainstream thing, as it's lessening that degree of like the hippie nature and becoming more of a industrial feedstock, right? And then also just the farming aspects of it. I mean, so I have grown for two years. I didn't grow this year because I decided I need primarily focus all my attention on getting manufacturing up and running, because we can get a whole bunch of farmers to grow hemp, but if there's no processing and supply chain in place, then that hemp is just going to go to waste, and the farmers aren't going to be able to make money. But I grew hemp for 2 years, fiber hemp from Canada, and it's just incredible. Pretty much how simple it is to grow, right? I mean, for any farmer that's out there, as long as you have haying equipment, you can pretty much grow fiber hemp, right? All you need is a grain drill to plant it, a sickle bar to cut it down, a rotary rake to turn it over, and then a round baler with some guarding on the cables and piping to bail it up, and it's ready to go. And so it's unlike the cannabinoid industry, which is, yeah, if you're a horticultural grower, you pretty much have all the equipment you need to grow it. But if you're just anybody else, it's going to be not impossible, but you're going to be putting millions of dollars into the infrastructure if you like even want to think about doing it. But for the fiber side of things, it's a pretty easy implant for farmers that are existing, right? Whether they're growing corn or they're growing hay, and then it's also just exciting to in terms of the environmental aspects of it. I mean, possibly down the road when we're having hundreds of thousands of acres or potentially millions of acres growing in the United States, maybe we'll have to deal with more pests and all that kind of stuff. But it has a pretty decent tolerance to pests. It has a great tolerance to like winter. I actually my first year, one of our fields, we were unable to harvest it due to the harvesting equipment being used for corn at the time. But we ended up leaving it, and it ended up surviving pretty much throughout the winter, and it winter redded, and then we harvested it later on and tested it out, right? So there's lots of opportunities for the hemp space. It's just, as you said, like the building out the infrastructure and the supply chain, and having a conference like NOCO, being able to connect all those points in the supply chain, because there's a lot of people that are targeting like they're trying to either just sell a product entirely, which is great, and you need to build those marketplaces, or they're just trying to start from the very beginning, but the middle components are kind of what's missing. While more clinical research is needed before we can make any medical claims, CBD has shown to greatly reduce inflammation, which can assist with ailments such as arthritis, chronic pain, and even anxiety. However, with so many CBD brands out there, it can be hard to distinguish which brands can offer top quality products while remaining affordable. Well, thanks to today's sponsor, CBD Peer, we can bring you just that. With decades of experience in the supplement industry, CBD Peer's team is offering What Can a Radio listeners a 15% discount to their American-made, high-quality, and yet affordable products. In fact, they are so confident you will love their products that they are offering a 90-day money-back guarantee. Just use the discount code WCD at checkout or click on the link in the description to get your 15% discount. We hope you enjoy their products just as much as we do. And now back to the show. And so from your perspective, what are some things that the United States is missing specifically in the fiber realm that are barriers in the way of it competing on a more global stage?
Processing, first and foremost. And once we establish real processing for the fiber side here in the United States, then I think that we're going to very well be the leader in fiber. And where the processing is in China and in Europe and let's say even in Canada, they have some fiber processing. It's all mechanized. It's all mechanical processing. And there's new processing technology that has yet to really be realized, that is developed here and that I'm familiar with. There's multiple technologies out there, and they're enzymatic decortication, biological decortication, that you put the materials and you can either run them through a countercurrent reactor like Pure Hemp Technology, who's been around for 20 some years doing various feedstocks, and Ed Lehrberger, they've got a countercurrent reactor, and it's really cool technology. You run stuff in one way and you throw fluid the other way, and it separates pulps, lignins, and sugars, spits them into 3 buckets. There's some other processes out there that do similar things with more biological enzymatic processes, big vats, and it'll separate everything out into 3 or 4 or 5 buckets. And closed loop, zero emission. And to me, that's the future, where and it's very cost effective. So there's people that have been working in the fuel industry, in the biofuel industry, that are now taking these ideas of what they were doing for feedstocks, creating fuel. Now, how can you separate all these things? So you've got all these various components that can go into plastics, sugar replacements, chemical replacements, and then you've got pulps that can go into packaging or into composites or into building materials or insulation. And so I think that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of technologies that are out there that are at a small pilot scale that actually work. And once they're upscaled with, the right amount of funding, which doesn't need to be significant, and we can process materials on a mass scale and commoditize them, I think that we'll see the price come down and be competitive with wood or competitive with petroleum and competitive with these things that we've been talking about. You know, hemp can replace cotton, it can replace petroleum, it can replace soy, it can replace corn, because it can create all these different ingredients. Once we get the processing in place, I think that hemp will prove what we've been saying all along. We're just not, how long is it going to take to get there? 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? Well, however long it takes, we'll get there. But I think the more of us that are talking about it and really making the initiative to see these things through, that it will happen sooner than later.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, the trying to figure out what is the time scale. I mean, again, going back to just how fast things have developed, whether it's just the research side of things, it's the manufacturing technologies that have developed just in the last, what is now 6 years, or no more than that, 8 years, right, for Colorado specifically. For the United States, 6 years. It's from a standstill, right, for like 85 years, basically. I mean, there's definitely some technologies that were able to kind of be pulled along, and you also can, as you're saying, you can import technologies from other countries and all that kind of stuff, but really getting things implemented here in the United States and then also advancing them further, it is really incredible to see how quickly we have moved, and also just science in general too, right? I mean, basically hemp missed the science and technology boom, so all these other crops that have specialized equipment for them, we basically know exactly how the plant's going to grow, right? You look at a field of corn, it's basically all the same level. You look at a field of industrial hemp, it's unless it's growing really, really well, it's probably going to be all sorts of different heights and sizes all throughout the entire field. You're going to have some points that are going to be completely nothing, and other points that you'll have a great crop. And so there's definitely a lot more work that we need to do to kind of finalize and really fine tune all those points. But as you were saying, like all the companies that are putting their blood, sweat, and tears into this movement, I guess you could say, or feedstock, as it's not really an industry, as has been talked about much of late, but it is really a feedstock, right? Going into many different industries. That's really the best way to put it, because even saying the hemp industries, right? Like at some point in time, you're definitely going to see the hemp market, right? People are going to be marketed hemp products, but there's going to be a larger majority of people that are just going to be buying a product and it just happens to be made out of hemp, right? And that's, I think, when
that's where we want to be. Is it's just another ingredient, but it happens to be one that's a better ingredient than the one that it replaced, which was made out of petroleum.
Absolutely. And what's amazing, even then, like you were saying, that aspect that, yeah, things are a little bit expensive right now, but even then, I mean, so for example, Bruce Dietzen in Florida with the hemp car, he's working on a composite that he's able to get it to meet current prices of other composites, and even be potentially the same strength as like fiberglass and that kind of stuff. And so things are kind of working to that point that they're meeting those numbers in terms of economics. But then once you match the numbers for the economics, you look at the environmental aspect, right? He was saying how for every pound of glass fiber or fiberglass that's produced, it releases eight pounds of CO2 into the atmosphere. For every pound of carbon fiber produced, it releases 31 pounds of CO2 in the atmosphere. But for every pound of material of his produced, it absorbs 1.65 pounds of CO2 from the atmosphere, right? So it's just the fact that you can already match almost economically, but then also the environmental aspect too. I mean, people have been saying it's carbon negative. You definitely need to make sure all the points in the supply chain are potentially carbon negative, or at least maybe not carbon negative, but neutral, right? So that you can try to buffer that as much as possible. But just the amount of CO2 that, and even other chemicals, volatile chemicals that the plant can absorb while it's growing in the field, and then it's able to be stored in all those products you're manufacturing down the road, is just it's fascinating to see. And just all the potential product lines that we can go with, right? I mean, maybe we don't necessarily want to be growing the hemp that's going into our clothing near a coal power plant as they're still running, but you could definitely grow them around there and potentially absorb more of the CO2 that's coming out of the plant, right? For going into like hempcrete and that kind of stuff. And so to kind of dial down a little bit and kind of focus specifically, if you could name 3, because again, yeah, the processing is definitely a thing that we need to get over the hurdle. And again, it's getting the right funding in place, getting all the points in the supply chain in place enough that you can convince an investor to actually invest in it. But in terms of product lines, what are maybe 3 products, whether you want to be really specific with them or more general, that you think are going to really kind of push the United States forward in terms of its development? Yeah, from the fiber side, yeah.
Well, I would say the paper and packaging side of things, because there's people working on that right now. And when we can do it to scale and at a price competitive situation, there's a lot of packaging with consumer products, whether that's the cannabis industry or the natural products industry, that is right there waiting for hemp-based packaging. So that's one for sure. I think that there's the auto industry with car paneling. I think that Ford and GM, all these manufacturers have expressed interest in utilizing materials that are natural fiber composite type materials like they're using in Europe in Audis and BMWs, and that stuff's happening, and American manufacturers are looking at that as well. And I think that that's a great opportunity. And then I would say the building material side of things, if we can, fast forward that a little bit, there's just such a great, we're going to continue to build commercial structures, residential structures, and we're going to remodel. So there's just a huge market for materials there. And if we can grow a lot of that stuff at home in the United States, rather than importing it from across wherever, look at the carbon footprint right there. Grown and manufactured or processed manufactured in the United States, instead of having to ship that stuff, this green material from wherever it's coming from. So I think those 3 right there. And then beyond that, when we kind of get into the food market, I would say animal feed. Once we can get to the point of allowing hemp as an animal feedstock for horses and cows and pigs and chickens, and the Animal Feed Coalition is working on a lot of that. But once that opens up, that's going to really help the grain side of things. And it comes back to the fiber and grain, dual crops. As a farmer, you can sell your grain, and it can either go for human consumption or animal consumption, and then you can sell the stalks and the stems and the sticks into the fiber market, and then that goes into all the stuff we've already been talking about. And the farmer walks away making pretty decent money, more than they would have made on corn or soy or wheat or hay, and they're actually helping out their land and making a difference in the environment.
Thank you very much for joining us here on What Canna Radio, where we bring a dose of reality to your conversations about hemp every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. If you enjoyed what you heard, please smash that like button below for our YouTube overlords. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel so you can be the first to know the secrets we reveal. If you need another dose of reality right this moment, check out the video up here, or if you want to see what YouTube has to offer you, check out the videos over here or down below. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a mind-expanding day.